Hello friends, welcome back to Strategic Management. And we are pursuing the elements of strengthening the process, wherein it's an important element, it's an important perspective which should evolve at this particular stage, wherein how to direct an organization, how to largely take the organization towards the vision through the long term strategic path. Up till now, we have been talking about strategy formulation, execution. We would be talking about execution, briefly once again. But the point is that at this stage, how to steer it towards that situation. Now, at this stage, we have slightly come beyond the perspective of competition, no competition, fortune at the bottom of the pyramid, development as freedom, environmental sustainability perspective and so on. Those things we are carrying along at this moment, but whichever way we are driving our strategy, how we are driving our organizations, how we are actually governing things basically, because of one single fact largely, that we want to do things right. We want to take a right path, that has always been there. We have to reach to the vision, that has always been there, and the greatness of the vision we have talked about that almost all the time. But then how to take a right step, first step right, then the second step right, and how to do everything in a right manner, not only in a correct manner, not only in a specified planned manner, but right, which should be seem, which everyone should seem like right basically, good and right, and this is what I am referring to. So, because until unless we think about doing things rightly, until that point we might not be able to take everyone along. We might not develop the conviction which is required for driving the organizations at the end. We might not have the complete value chain for a long term along with us, because value chain comprises of people. People come along with you when they find you transparent, when they find you that you want to think best for them, when they find that you want to do things right. And we all understand this. I would not go into the details of ethics as of now. We have talked about that briefly earlier also. But corporate governance largely is about ethical conduct within an organization, of an organization, in relation to the environment of the organization basically. And that ethical conduct basically has to be enumerated, has to be specified in terms of policies. We have talked about policies earlier also. But here we are talking about how to define those policies, how to actually lead those policies, and governance is all about leading, the directional aspect of executing those policies, taking those policies along basically. And you see, there are several kinds of things which generate conflict within the organizations, and between the organizations, and the environment. For example, the policy makers of the land, the politics, and other such situations, wherein you go to, we talked about internationalization, you go to other countries and you may generate conflict out of several kinds of situations which you may face. Why does conflict comes in? Conflict comes in largely because of one factor. When we put our own interest too much into the situation basically, wherein I direct almost everything towards my own interest. It is not bad, many people do business just for the sake of their own interest, to grow by themselves, to earn money and so on. That is not wrong actually. But are we doing that rightly? Are we doing that against the promises which we have made? Are we actually interpreting those promises in terms of our own interest only, or largely in our own interest? And that is fundamentally the question. Ethics, we all know, ethics is not relative basically. Ethics has been many a times interpreted relatively. I would not go much into those kind of details, but we all understand that. But here the major question is how to be specific, how to be transparent, how to keep the promises, how to keep up the right path in a right manner and do things rightly. That is what corporate governance is all about, wherein we should not be known by a wrong name kind of. And let us see what happens when corporate governance is not done in a right kind of a fashion. But first of all, let us try to find out what corporate governance is defined as. Corporate governance is the set of mechanisms used to manage the relationship among shareholders and to determine and control the strategic direction and performance of organizations. Determine and control the strategic direction and performance of the organizations. There is one more thing which is very interesting and which we should remember at this moment, is that when we try to grow and growth becomes the focus, the main motivation for us in terms of organizational growth, in terms of sales, in terms of revenue, in terms of profits, profitability, in terms of gain for almost everyone. Even if you are looking deeply into the interests of all your stakeholders, but somehow if we are trying to grow linearly at a very fast pace, we become vulnerable. Organizations, they do become vulnerable when they speed up. It is not that speeding up is wrong, basically it is actually one of the objectives, but the point is that you see, for example, you are going on a highway, there has to be some control in terms of speed. There are several reasons to that, and it is good for you as well, because you can check on several kinds of things all around in terms of monitoring your own speed and avoiding the risks, basically. So, speed, excessive speed actually enhances vulnerability. In 2007 and 8, a huge recession came in. You see, I have been talking about these kind of things because these are phenomena which do not happen so often, so easily. We have seen pocketed recessions, we have seen pocketed disasters, but for example COVID-19, for example 2008 and 7 and 8 recession, these are larger phenomena affecting things globally. So 2007 and 8 we realized that organizations which were not following the specific conduct, the specific rules of conduct, the specific aspects of good governance, the specific aspect of doing things right, they collapsed, they defaulted, and along with those corporations, organizations, many people drowned. Whole of the value chains, many value chains, they disrupted. And because it was closely related to financial sector, which was supporting almost everything around this world, most of the industries got affected, many economies, they were pulled down and so on. And there are so many movies and documentaries made on 2007 and 8 recession, and if you will watch those documentaries and movies, you would realize that several kinds of, should I say greed or should I say excessive speed based reasons, and should I say that self-interest based reasons were involved in that kind of a situation, which we can say now that could have been avoided somehow. So, you see, when we say corporate governance, it is about determining and controlling the strategic direction and performance of organizations. At its core, corporate governance is concerned with identifying ways to ensure, and this is an important term, ensure that strategic decisions are made effectively, which you see, strategic decisions, they have implications, and as strategy is a long term path, basically anything done wrong at this moment would have ripple effect, would go a long way alongside as far as the whole path goes. It can be in terms of a product which may be detrimental to this environment, that can also be there, and corporate governance is also about the choice of the processes and the products also at the end of the day. It is not just about conduct rules within the organizations, although most of the governance literature has been talking about the financial and the organizational conduct, and how we take things further, especially in terms of financial management, but then definitely it is also all about choosing the products which or processes which would determine the due course of strategy and strategy implementation at the end of the day. Governance can also be thought of as a means corporations use to establish order between parties, the firm's owners and its top level managers. Here we are referring to Hitt, Ireland and Hoskisson, wherein authors they have taken a perspective around corporate governance, wherein they are trying to elaborate upon things with the perspective of relationships between managers and top executives and the stakeholders and so on. So that is why the story starts from here. And you see, the story also has an element of when we start growing, as I was trying to say, one element is speed, the other element is also important, the span. For example, today I have a small organization which is well in control, and definitely I am the owner. So I would have a larger interest towards my own growth, but definitely I should be looking in terms of the benefit of my customers as well as my employees. However small organization I have, if I do not want to retain my employees and stabilize the lives of my employees, I probably am not doing justice with as far as bringing them on board and assuring them with so many kinds of things. And that is what specifically happens in small companies, wherein people are hired and promises are being made, but probably there are no policies or there are lesser policies to upkeep the level of their lives in due course of time. And if someone does, then the organization remains intact and it grows well. But regardless of that, largely the interest, the profits are directed towards me. When I am growing further, and because of the possibility that I may not be knowing everything, I may hire other people as equally educated or as equally wise as me or as equally aware of the business which I do. They are professionals, they are hired for their skills, they are hired for several kinds of things, attitude, character as well, but largely because of their knowledge and skills. Now I delegate few things to them and we are growing. Now there is one interest which I have been pursuing, then other side it is their interest. It is well manageable because the span has increased a bit. When it grows further, several professionals are there. I cannot attend to everyone. I am not very well assured of what kind of an integrity and the level of integrity they may pursue in due course of time. Although I am trying to develop a culture, I am trying to percolate the values in due course of time to create that environment wherein integrity of everyone remains intact. I am trying to do that, but things are growing. And on the other side, my profits, my stakes are increasing, profits are increasing, the money around is increasing, the revenue is increasing and wealth is increasing. So how would I keep my integrity intact? That is also a question. So both sides, when the span keeps on increasing, then conflict situation may rise, and that is what authors also try to tell us, wherein they say that governance can also be thought of as a means corporation used to establish order between parties, the firm's owners and its top level managers whose interests may conflict. Thus corporate governance reflects and enforces the company's values. Remember, we talked about values and culture at length. Here comes values and culture. Historically, firms were managed by the founder owners, as I said, and you see that is where authors draw our attention towards separation of ownership and managerial control. So historically, firms were managed by the founder owners and their descendants, and still large number of businesses in this world are family owned businesses. But then there is a professional structure those families have created and so on. Many of the businesses, they are still managed by kings and their families around this world. So historically firms were managed by the founder owners and their descendants. In these cases, corporate ownership and control resided in the same persons. As firms grew larger, and that is the point which I tried to make, the managerial revolution led to a separation of ownership and control in most large corporations, where control of the firm shifted from entrepreneurs to professional managers, while ownership became dispersed among thousands of unorganized stockholders who were removed from the day-to-day management of the firm. The structure grows, so many investors come in, there are institutional investors, there are large investors, there are stockholders, many kinds of investors. If you have large number of stockholders, you promise them that their stock would rise. they would be benefited in terms of getting associated with this company. That is one part, but definitely they might not have that kind of a managerial control. They are just stockholders and they are there for their own benefit basically, and they rely on your managerial decisions for their gains at the end of the day, but you are answerable to them. You see, they are a partner of sorts with their organization. They have shown their confidence in your company. So that is one part. On the other side, you have large number of managers managing different kinds of functionalities, and I was talking about integrity also. And on the other side, you also want to control the situation, because definitely you yourself or your forefathers initiated this business, and you have that kind of a situation wherein you look at the things from this side. So this, when the span goes, and that is why this specific term managerial revolution, that means when corporations started becoming large, they started hiring managerial skills, management people, and managers and leaders. These changes created the modern public corporations, which is based on the efficient, corporations are based on the efficient separation of ownership and managerial control. Supporting the separation is a basic legal premise, suggesting that the primary objective of a firm's activities is to increase the corporation's profit and thereby the financial gains of the owners, that is the shareholders. It is all about promises, and it is all about keeping the promises. It is all about actually having an integrity and transparency in terms of conducting the business basically. I would not say that huge linear growth is not good, it is very good. But again, the point is, that is what we have been trying to pursue all through. Rationality in almost everything which we do. When we talk about blue oceans, we refer to that kind of a rationality. When we talk about specific strategic steps, rationality is involved. When we talk about fortune at the bottom of the pyramid and diversifying, rationality is involved, because ultimately we wish to create a structure wherein somehow we do not lose the sight of doing things right. I did not denounce takeovers, but you see, there somehow, if we are answerable to our own shareholders, the organizations which we are trying to take over, they are also answerable to someone. So, should not we be answerable to all the stakeholders throughout the value chains or throughout the market sphere or throughout the value web somehow, because all of those are part of the system largely somehow. Should we be directing everything towards the interest of our organization and then ourselves somehow? Should not we be checking on things at some kind of a stage? And if we are checking things at some kind of a stage, then definitely we would be vigilant about checking things at every stage more or less. And the question is that if I take, as I said, take one step wrong, then probably different kinds of wrong steps might be taken in due course of time as far as the strategic progression goes, and that is where organizational derailment might happen in due course of time. The separation between owners and managers creates an agency relationship, and here comes the perspective of agency relationship. An agency relationship exists when one or more persons, the principal or principals, hire another person or persons, the agent or agents, as decision making specialists to perform a service. When you have to grow, you have to bring those people on board, and they may act as agents to you or your organization. So, thus an agency relationship exists when one party delegates decision making responsibility to a second party for compensation. Why would that party devote their lives to your organization just because they are being compensated for that? I do not think it is true. They should be getting mentally associated with that organization, they should belong to that organization. How would they belong to that organization? If they find that element of integrity in you, that is the person sitting at that level. If they find true values or a deep value match with their values, if they find the culture conducive, if they find it worth staying for, worth devoting their life for in due course of time. You see, if you ask a soldier why you are associated with defense forces, soldier would say to defend my country, to serve my country, and there is a purpose there. If you ask a corporate executive at a senior level, why are you there with this organization and you are devoting your life? Just because you are finding work very satisfying? Is that a reason? That might be, yes, definitely. But then devoting one's life to an organization is a big question, and that is where this perspective comes in. So, within organizations, an agency relationship exists between managers and their employees, as well as between top executives and the firm's owners. However, the relationship that requires more attention is between the firm's owners, the principals, and the top level managers, the principals' agents, as this relationship directly influences how firm strategies are implemented. You see, when you start leading the things and you are at the hem of the affairs, you become vulnerable. Speed is vulnerability, speed creates vulnerability, span creates vulnerability, and the position also creates vulnerability. So, vulnerability in terms of how well you would keep things intact as far as your role goes basically. If you feel like a custodian, then people may ask you why you are not getting your own benefits, why you are not thinking about your own benefits, you are earning money for others. This kind of question might be there. So, you have to define a purpose for why you belong to this organization as a top executive. What are you getting out of it? And on the other side, if owner doesn't care for as far as their personal gain goes, they might be asked the same question. So, this has to be justified in terms of at individual level actually. There are many organizations, I have talked to the head of these organizations, very large corporations, and I have been discussing this thing with them, and they many a times I have found that in letter and spirit they say that they are the custodians, and they remain custodians for whole of their lives. Living their passion is that this organization should do well at the end of the day, because they say that I would not be carrying anything when I leave this world, and they try to live with this kind of a thought. But the question is that how to keep up that kind of a thing, because if you keep up that kind of a thing, then things would be going in a right kind of a fashion at the end of the day. And here comes a structure which explains agency relationship. So, shareholders, principals, firm owners are there. They hire managers, agents, the decision makers, and create an agency relationship wherein risk bearing specialist principal paying compensation to a managerial decision making specialist. Now, owner may always say, or the principal may always say that risk is all mine because I have invested money, so I should be earning more, and everything should be directed towards me. And the managerial decision maker specialist would say that I am earning it for you, so I must have the larger compensation, and everything belongs to me. So, you see, there is a conflicting kind of a situation which may arise, and it's self explanatory that happens, and corporate governance is all about dealing with this kind of a situation to create an environment, to create structures, to create policies wherein everything remains intact and people should abide by the sole purpose of the organization while submitting their own purposes within that sphere. Now, there are several problems, agency problems. The separation between ownership and managerial control can be problematic. There may arise variety of agency problems in the modern corporation, and I can enumerate several kinds of cases which have happened around the world, and I quoted one incident in terms of as far as recession goes, and if you will, as I said, you will look into those cases, you would find several organizations named there, and you would realize that several kinds of situations happened with each one of them in totality. After that, in singular incidents, there are several kinds of cases which you will find as far as exemplifying these kind of situations go. So, but here the point is that there may arise variety of agency problems in modern corporations. Problems can surface because the principal and the agent have different interests and goals. That is where we started our story. Or because shareholders lack direct control of large publicly traded corporations. Individual shareholder might not be able to affect the situation in totality. Problems also arise when an agent makes decisions that result in the pursuit of goals that, you see, mark these, when an agent makes decisions that result in the pursuit of goals that conflict with those of the principals. Thus, the separation of ownership and control potentially allows divergent interests between principals and agents to surface, which can lead to managerial opportunism. Authors have very intelligently introduced this term to us, opportunism. And you see, opportunities are important for the organizations, but opportunism within the organization for an individual is not good, because that individual or those people would start working in their self interest, directing things towards them. Have you heard of that situation wherein a CEO of an automotive company in Japan, he belonged to France, I think, and then he went to Japan, and there he led two organizations simultaneously as a CEO, and then several kinds of things happened and so on. It is a famous documentary also. There are several other kinds of documentaries which may exemplify those kind of situations wherein self-interest became very important. So, when an agent becomes powerful within the organization because they are executing that, they have control, their decisions are bringing fruits for the organization, then principals might not hinder their process at a particular point of time. And you see, they also want several interests to be directed towards them, and somehow conflicts they start generating on. Conflicts may also start generating on wherein principals, they have different kinds of philosophies which are right, and the decision makers here, specialists, do not have that kind of righteous policies or perspective as far as conduct rules go. There may be a conflicting situation where owners or the principals, they do not care about righteousness, and managers, they want to do everything in a righteous manner because they are answerable to the stockholders as well as the employees. So, several kinds of situations they come up. Managerial opportunism is the seeking of self-interest with guile, that is cunning or deceit, as the authors try to explain. Opportunism is both an attitude, example, an inclination, and a set of behaviors, that is specific acts of self-interest. Self-interest, is that bad? Yes, it is bad if it converts, gets converted into greed basically. Definitely it is bad, because then we would be blinded by as far as the situation goes. So, it is not possible for principals to know beforehand which agents will or will not act opportunistically, and it is also not possible for agents to know that which principal would not act opportunistically at the end of the day. So, the reputations of top executives are an imperfect predictor, and opportunistic behavior cannot be observed until it has occurred, and that is the basic question basically, how to predict that. It happens, then we get to know, because we never realize the intent of a person until unless it is, it comes to fore. Thus, principles establish governance and control mechanisms to prevent agents from acting opportunistically, even though only a few are likely to do so, and it happens vice versa also. The agents also may create or help in creating that environment wherein principals may not act opportunistically at the end of the day. I would be coming back to you in my next session with further details on governance mechanisms and how these kind of situations can be avoided, what companies have been doing to avoid this kind of a conflict, and what companies are doing in terms of good corporate governance. I will catch up back with you. Till then, goodbye.